So I thought I could make it as an engineer, and I gradually discovered that as Sam Hayakawa, a former senator, once a teacher of general semantics, one of his books, he points out that some people are better at symbol manipulation and some people are better at thing manipulation. I'm much better at symbol manipulation. When something goes wrong with an appliance, I call a repairman instead of trying to repair it myself. That is not the ideal personality for an engineer. So I decided to go into pure mathematics, so I didn't know how I was going to make a living from that, but I thought I'd get an advanced degree and teach pure mathematics. But meanwhile, I still wanted to be a writer, and I was still writing.
So you had continued writing after the failure of The Age of Miracles?
Oh yeah, I wrote, in my high school days, I wrote quite a few short stories, which I sent to such sterling publications as Ellery Queen's Mystery Magazine, Amazing Stories, and Weird Tales, and they all came back. The worst disillusionment of all was when a story I sent to Weird Tales came back with a rejection slip from Thrilling Western Tales. I never did figure that out. But it suddenly gave me a vision of how much attention they paid to unsolicited manuscripts by unknown authors.
Were you still doing that in technical school?
Yeah, but when I got into Brooklyn Polytech, which is a college level, I was working days, going to night school, and they pile the homework on you even though they know you're working days. I didn't write much in those years.
What kind of work were you doing?
I was an engineering aide at a big engineering firm, and that meant I did all the what nowadays we call shit work that the engineers themselves didn't want to be bothered with. I made graphs out of the data they obtained in the field. I wrote abstracts of articles that might interest the electrical engineering department and circulated them to all the engineers so they could read my abstract and decide whether they wanted to read the whole article or not. I assisted in experiments on corrosion in the corrosion laboratory, which I suppose was the beginning of my interest in Buddhism. I suddenly began to realize all things are impermanent. Metals corrode, organisms die, everything is in a process of continuous change, and trying to stop corrosion is impossible. The aim of corrosion engineering is not to stop corrosion, but to slow it down so that whatever metal thing you're trying to protect will last as long as possible. You don't expect it to last forever. Corrosion and rust are anaerobic bacteria. Something will get it eventually. So corrosion engineering is the art of the possible, how to slow down the decay process.
So how many years were you directly doing engineering or studying engineering?
7 years. And it left me with I think a suspicion toward all theories that can't be demonstrated with working models. I don't like abstractions much. I don't like abstract theories much. I don't know. I don't exactly disagree with them. They just don't get me interested. Well, so what? I feel about ideology like John Adams, our second president, who said ideology had a couple of syllables too many. It should be just called idiocy.
So you like stuff that can either be demonstrated or be used in some useful way?
Yes, very much so.
And what about when you left the engineering world? Where did you flee?
I did all sorts of things. I wrote advertising copy for 2 years. I distributed samples door to door for Procter & Gamble for a couple of weeks once. I worked as an ambulance attendant for about 6 months.
What kind of experiences did you have there?
Oh, that was very educational. I was working in Spanish Harlem. I got to see a great deal of the aspects of New York life that are now very popular on TV, on shows like Law and Order and NYPD Blue. I got to see it up close. The cops could see how young I was for an ambulance attendant, so they would arrange to make sure I saw the most gruesome case up close just to see how I'd react to them.
So going back to your early childhood for a minute, what's your most vivid memory of that time?
King Kong and Frankenstein and the Wolf Man, The Devil and Daniel Webster, The Thief of Baghdad. And any movie that showed things that were impossible fascinated me. I wanted to know how they did them. And also, despite my aversion to abstractions, I have no aversion whatsoever to fantasy. I regard fantasy as a special kind of language.
What kind of language?
A poetic language. I think Frankenstein and the Wolfman are among the most poetic movies ever made.
So you feel that the poetic language of fantasy talks to us in like Jungian type terms, or?
Jung is one good source to try to understand. I don't think Jung explains fully. I don't think anybody understands fully the power of poetry and fantasy. I think they come from a level of the psyche, or to be more modern about it, the nervous system. They come from some level of the brain, the nervous system, the neuroendocrine system. They come from somewhere deep inside that you never create them. You just let them run rampant, and they come out of your fingers and onto the paper.
So when you were a child, you felt just the raw power of the imagery and were excited by it.
Yeah, I didn't know the word allegory. I didn't know the word parable. I didn't know the word unconscious. I'd never heard of Carl Jung. But my favorite movies all opened up those kind of vistas. Every now and then I'd see a realistic film I liked, but it was always it always had something off-kilter about it, like The Maltese Falcon, where instead of the hero and heroine kissing at the end, he turns her over to the cops, and the Falcon turns out to be fake. Every John Huston film has this theme of the impossible goal which you almost achieve and then you lose it. It's as persistent in John Huston as the mysterious stranger who doles out justice and injustice equally and then disappears, reappears over and over in Clint Eastwood's films. Some writers get hung up on a particular archetype and directors and do it over and over.
Do you feel as a writer you have a particular archetype?
I seem to have more than one. The underground journey seems to appear in all of my novels in one form or another. Not always Dante's form of it, but one form or another of underground journey. Also the theme of the elderly shaman teaching the younger one how to become a shaman. I didn't get that from Carlos Castaneda. I was writing that type of thing before I ever heard of Carlos Castaneda. It's just a theme that I resonate with.
Was there anyone in your environment in any way that like influenced you to become a writer, indirectly?
Just the writers I read. Nobody in my environment.
Early on, did you have anything that we would call like spiritual experiences?
Yeah, movies like the ones I mentioned. I didn't know they were spiritual experiences, but in retrospect I think they were. The biggest disappointment of my childhood was my first Holy Communion. According to the teaching of the Church, and I hope I don't misquote, I've been out of the Church so long, I may not have the dogma exactly correct, but I think I understood that one pretty well. After the priest says the magic formula over the piece of bread, it is no longer a piece of bread. It has become not only the body, but also the blood of Jesus Christ. And so if you eat the body and blood of this Jew who's been dead for 2,000 years, it'll make you feel real good and you'll have a spiritual experience. And the idea of cannibalism as a spiritual experience was really unique to the Catholic Church before Hannibal Lecter came along and popularized the idea. But I remember how excited I was, looking forward to my first Holy Communion. I took the wafer and nothing happened. There was no spiritual experience. Nothing happened at all. I just had a piece of dry bread in my mouth, not very tasty.